So, good morning, everybody. Victor Kotler is here on air together with
Marcus Muth
and
Dario Erding.
So, as you can hear, we are today 3 people presenting our third BOLL online session out of our series regarding FortiOS version 6.4. What's new? It's a pleasure to have you online. So heartily welcome to this third of our BOLL online session. As we did it the last few times, please be aware that we have some initial things to tell you. You are muted during our webinar. You can always give us some questions which we try to answer online directly during the BOLL online session. And in the end, we will also have a question and answer time where we can go into some open questions if wished later on. But feel free to ask questions via the Q&A, the Fragen Antworten. If we have any difficulties during the webinar, please let us know it via the chat. As you can see, the hosts today are 3 of us. It's a pleasure to do this BOLL online session together with Marcus Muth. He's one of our senior system engineers in our support team, also a teacher in our authorized training center, so well known. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Marcus, and I'm keen to see then the live demos together with you and Dario.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Victor. Victor is best known for our sales engineering at the Fortinet department. Many of you might know him. He's not only a salesperson, he also has deep technical knowledge, and yeah, it's always good to work together.
Thank you, Dario.
Okay, yeah, that was Dario, and I'm Marcus. Happy to host the session today. And yeah, I'm really glad that I have Dario backing me up here with mainly the FortiSwitch part. And he's also taking a lot of interest in that product, building up our own infrastructure, and he has gained many expertise on this product that he hopefully can show off today.
So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to work with you guys together. We had yesterday already our German session, and we had a lot of things we prepared. So the agenda looks like this. I'm in the middle of the introduction. We'll give you later on or shortly the sales update regarding some new products. We would like to highlight the newest FortiClient and FortiEDR product developments, and also some news regarding FortiAnalyzer Manager, the stackable series. And later on, of course, we will hand over to the real technical deep dive where Dario and Marcus will really deep dive into FortiSwitch and let's say Wi-Fi feature sets in combination of the great new FortiOS 6.4 released functionalities. And of course, at the end, still time for question and answers. But as I indicated, please feel free to put your questions online during the session. We try to answer them directly. Okay, so let's dive into the sales update. Regarding new products, as you for sure might know that Fortinet has in the Wi-Fi spec 3 versions of management possibilities. The very known and let's say long-term integrated into the FortiGate Wi-Fi controller version works with the 40 access points, 40 APs. Since the acquisition in 2015-16 of Meru, Fortinet has added the controller, the infrastructure 40 VLC controller-based solution, which works together with the 40 access point universal series. So the U series is in fact built for working with the wireless controller, but the U series can of course also be used with the FortiGates if needed. And last but not least, all of these 40 access points can be managed out of the cloud. So what's new regarding products is that Fortinet has launched Already in Q2 2019, the FAP-U 431F and 433F. As you can see, the one is integrated and the other is external antennas. It is a use case mainly focused on high density, high performance indoor solutions. And it has a 4x4 MIMO technology built in with 3 radios. So it's a triple radio and it's Wi-Fi 6 already. But as you might know, the Wi-Fi 6 standard is not fully ratified. So every vendor which provides the Wi-Fi 6 solution yet, of course, is an early adapter, but we are quite, let's say, confident that these products will remain hardware-wise the same. So the thing will be just software-wise finalized. The ratification is obviously a little bit delayed, so it's in the second half of this year. Important maybe for you to recognize that these 3 radios have different flavors of in which band it works. So radio 1 only in 5 gig, the radio 2 can be chosen in either 2.4 legacy or 5 gig high band, and the radio 3 also 2.4 and 5 gig is just a 2x2 stream mainly for scanning purpose. We will see later on also in the live demo what this means. One point to indicate is that because we have quite a high density, high performance access point in front of us, the Ethernet interfaces, there are 2 of them, and one of the interfaces provides 2.5 gig Ethernet connectivity, and a 1 gig backup port is also included. And below you see the prices, list prices, exclusive value-added taxes. So for both versions, the same price. The brother, which was just released in this year in Q2, is for the integrated solution. So it's the FortiGate, is the FortiAP E 431F. So it's nearly, let's say, something like a twin. The difference is, if you look on the radios, that there are slightly differences, that the radio 2, for example, can't be a dual use. It's fixed on 5 gig, and the radio 1 as well is 2.4 gig. Radio 3, as I indicated before, is for scanning only, in this case even just 1 by 1. Again, we have this Ethernet interfaces, 2.5 gig, which is quite cool for this high density, high performance access point. Something we have been also waiting quite for a while, and now finally in Q4 it was released, so it's also available, is the replacement of the old 321C series. Now they have made a gap with the D and jumped directly on the E. It's a 3x3 multi-MIMO access point, which is not Wi-Fi 6, but 802.11 AC Wave 2. So quite a new and well-known technology. This provides just 1 gig internal Ethernet interface, but it's more or less sufficient for this kind of access point. And the price is very attractive with 690 Swiss francs, as you can see. A little bit more specific or exotic access point, which will be shown also in our live demo, is the FAP 231E. Again, an Wave 2 AC access point with 2x2 MIMO, but triple radio. So we have radio 1, 2, and 3, where radio 3 is mainly for scanning purpose thought. And here you have also to recognize in which band which radio is working. So 5 gig is the preferred way to go. And this is again 2-port gigabit normal RJ45 power over Ethernet. And as you can see, all of them might be working with the lower power AF power budget, but the recommended way is, of course, to use the 30 watt power over Ethernet as the source. And also the price, quite attractive, is a pendant to our well-known run rate 221E. The difference is the third radio, which gives you a dedicated monitoring capability. So let's switch over to the switches. As we know, we have there an entire family of switches with the entry-level 100 series. Quite cool if you would like to have a fanless solution, even with power over Ethernet. Our small 8-port gigabit Ethernet switches give you there in hand for silent realization in meeting rooms and so on. Have of course bigger brothers. The 200 mid-range is as it was. We have some changes in the premium series 400 I will present, and of course there's still the aggregation 500 series. This gives you, by side of the 10 gig which we have in the 400 series uplink, also 40 gig uplinks which can be splitted by a special fan-out cable into 4 times 10 gig, or we have 2 times 40 gig SFP uplinks we can use in the 500 series, but this remains the same as well known. So what's new is mainly the 148 series we just released last year in Q2. To recognize is that in the 100 series, not all ports in the PoE are powered. So out of the 48 ports, we have 24 ports powered with a power budget of 370 watts. And as you might recognize, there is no FPoE, so we have not a high power budget version. So you have to go with these two brothers. And price-wise, you see also what we have indicated below the tables. It is in fact an enlargement of the 24 version. Maybe important to recognize these switches can be used, of course, standalone, but our, let's say, favorized implementation is, as we will show you later on in our demo, is via FortiLink directly connected to a FortiGate, which gives you the very interesting fabric approach. For people who would like to manage this as standalone, just a remark, the cloud management for 3 switches have been removed, so there's no free tier anymore available. Quite an interesting new switch released in Q3 2019. I already have this one in my hands, is that high power and also with the higher capability 2.5 gig ports, which might be a nice combination with this 400 series access point I presented before. And it has even 2 5 gig capable ports by side of our 4 10 gig SFP plus slots for uplink or connection of service if needed, and has also a high power, ultra high power PoE port, which is powering the 8 2.5 gig ports. Quite an interesting solution with 420 watts. So look on that if you have this high speed wireless projects in combination with switches. Something I quite often have been asked, if there is some plans to have not just 10 gig as in the data center switch SFP solution, but also a normal 1 gig SFP fan out switch. And yes, we have now the answer here. This is the 424 fiber switch, providing 24 SFP slots, can be then used for the small form factor pluggable transceivers, either the SX or the LX for short range or long range, multi-mode or single mode, depending on your use case, beside of 4 times SFP plus slots to be able to make a cool uplink connection or interconnectivity to servers, even by direct attach cables and so on. So this is the answer. And yes, it is also with a redundant power supply already built into the switch out of the box. The 400 series got a refresh. As we know, there is still the D series around. So you can find the 400 now in the flavor of E as well. The main difference is that we have 4 times 10 gig capable SFP plus uplinks. And you see also that this one comes out with the different power budgets as a PoE and the FPoE version. There you also will recognize that all ports are power over Ethernet, let's say, fired, not just the half like I said on the 100 series. This is one of the quite popular upmarket campus Ethernet switches where you need really high-speed uplinks. We see also that this switch will be used sometimes in the SD-WAN, SD branch solution in a combination where you need FortiGate switches and the access points out of one hand. Quite a cool solution. And the, let's say, recommended use case is, of course, use it via FortiLink in the security fabric integrated. This is, in fact, a key selling point. Of course, there is also a 48 version. You will get all these slides later on by email as a link to download, so you can still have a look if you're interested in more details, more time. So I skipped this. It is, in fact, the big brother, and all of the 48 ports are fired as well with the corresponding power budget. So let's leave now let's say, what's new regarding some hardware products and go into some price updates quite reasonably. In regard of FortiOS 6.4, it's quite interesting that Fortinet has just released in the Q2 price list the FortiClient 6.4. And by side of that, maybe the one or the other has realized we have also FortiEDR. This is a new product which has been, in fact, bought by an acquisition from Ensilo, where we have to say both of these, let's say, endpoint protection solutions have their marketplace. So the FortiEDR is not replacing FortiClient. It is let's say, attachment to that. And of course, FortiEDR is quite cool if you have another solution on FortiClient, where you also can say, I use it then as an extra by side of my standard endpoint protection solution. FortiClient is mainly also as a free version available for SSL IPsec VPN connection. If you would like to use the full feature set, then you have to buy the EMS, the fabric agent. I give you some information to that. As a comparison, again, just to see where are some overlaps. There's just a minimal overlap between FortiClient and FortiEDR. So we see that AV, both of them are providing, both have vulnerability scanning, patching possibilities, and possibilities to have an application inventory. But then there are quite a lot of differences, especially if you look on the FortiEDR, where you really have a pre and post infection, let's say, scanning options and yeah, forensic investigations are with logging and out of the box plans where you have really possibilities to automate the threat containment and so on. And this is really a very, very interesting product. I give you some more information right now. Something which you might recognize that regarding the AV scanning, FortiClient and FortiEDR use some different mechanism. In the FortiClient, we have this content pattern recognition language, and in the EDR, it's machine learning, which is underlying. So this slide as a reference, FortiEDR as a real-time endpoint protection gives you, of course, in different combinations and the possibility to look for pre-infection avoidance. But of course, even in a post-infection situation, you are not lost. You have there really deep detection possibilities in real time. It stops breaches. So if you have ransomware, even on your machine, it hinders the, let's say, deployment of ransomware and stops the outbreak. You have, of course, a visibility for forensic stuff, and redemonition is also integrated into the solution. So what is quite important, this is not the idea that we have now to go to each individual point, but if you look on the upper right block, it is very light and fast. So it's just using something between 6 and 100 meg RAM and one person CPU. And even the network traffic consumption is per host very small footprint. And as you can see, the platform coverage is really big. So even we have there the possibilities for, let's say, OT environment that the solution is growing and growing. Regarding deployment options, yes, you can deploy it in the cloud. You have an on-prem or of course a hybrid solution. And even with air gap systems in the IoT area, it have solutions. So it's really very strong add-on into the Fortinet family. And last but not least, of course, Fortinet is opening it in a multi-tenancy way, even for MSSP MDR providers. Regarding ordering, we have to be aware this product has a bundle price which is based on endpoint per seat. These bundles can be sold in packages of 25, 500 and 10,000 seats. But there are some rules regarding seat count. So depending on which package you are, let's say, looking for, you have standard 500 plus seats you have to take into account. Only if you're MSSP, you can start with, of course, your own portions with lower than 250 seats. And there is in the full package a way where it starts at 250 seats. So these are points we can, of course, then look if you have some demand that you make you the corresponding offers. This is as a reference. Of course, Fortinet has a lot of information also online where you will find these different packages. So FortiEDR has this predict and protect. This bundle is designed for customers that are price sensitive and not as security mature. The FortiEDR protect and response. This is designed for customers that are secure, mature, but a bit price sensitive. And the complete set, this is in fact where predict, protection, and response is bundled in all-in-one bundle. It includes asset discovery, risk management, and so on. And this is really then the way to go, which we recommend, or Fortinet recommends. And last but not least, of course, the package where you have this air-gapped solutions. This is mainly for specific manufacturing environment, OT, and critical infrastructure, where customers demand an on-premise deployment and computers maybe behind an air gap. So there are a lot of solutions. Something you have also to recognize that in the initial deployment, you have a deployment service which is mandatory. For later renewals, this is not anymore mandatory. And if you would like to have this as a combination, as a combined package, you can see it's stackable. So if you need, for example, 600 endpoints, you can buy 1 times a 500 packet and 4 times a 24 packet. So this gives you then, of course, then the required end amount. And as said, in the complete package, we start with 500 endpoints. Regarding FortiClient, this is one of my last topics, is that we have now not longer the cloud where we need a premium hosting fee in the FortiClient Cloud solution. This is really then in an own SKU built up with 6.4, where you can buy directly the cloud management functionality out of the box. So you need no longer this 41 Cloud premium account. And there are packages of 25 and 500. Actually, documented is a limit of 500 endpoints. But as we see in the 6.2 version, there is a limit of 5,000 endpoints, which can be cloud managed. And I'm quite sure that 6.4 will also raise the bar so that at the end, we have not just 500 endpoints managed, but more. Currently, no FortiClient for Chrome in the cloud version. For the normal way where you have that on-prem, where you need a Windows server below for the EMS installation, we can now really count on this volume discounted 25, 500, 10,000 packets, which can be stacked. And so this is something where you can really easy then grow. And at the end, if you need more synchronized, let's say, end dates, we still can provide you a code term on your demand. Technically, there are some points to recognize that FortiClient works, in fact, in a direct upgrade if you have FortiClient 6.2 Otherwise, you have to check out the upgrade path anyhow in the release notes. It works if you use it as a FortiClient Windows only if you really would like to have the full set in combination with the EMS 6.4 version. The free VPN-only version can be used since FortiOS 5.6 on the FortiGates and later versions, so there is a backward compatibility to the supported FortiOS versions, so you can go directly with that if you don't need the fully blown FortiClient. A side remark regarding for guys who are using the FortiClient single sign-on mobility agent, this needs then a purchase of an AMS license. The free version is not combinable with this single sign-on mobile agent. And my last, let's say, update from the sales part before we dive into the technical demonstration is regarding the FortiAnalyzer and FortiManager S series. S is the stackable, and the stackable means that we can have now really not sorry, that we have now really with the stackable, we have a combination of the services and the license for 1, 3, or 5 years. And we have still the well-known deployment and license options for appliances, virtual machines, and so on. And what is important to know, in the cloud version, we need a FortiCloud Premium account to use the FortiAnalyzer S and the FortiManager S series. So just have a look into that pricing where we can stack this 5, 50, and 500 gig logs per day. And the same is, of course, then with the FortiManager. As a reference, that you see what is with the current well-known perpetual license, FATS VM licenses versus the new stackable licenses, which is quite remarkable, is that we have a SOC subscription service and the IOC subscription included, where with the perpetual license only the IOC is available, but you have to buy it individually, and the SOC subscription is not supported yet. Regarding supported FortiAnalyzer versions, this subscription version needs 6.4.1 and later. The rest is supported since eternity. The FortiManager, as the last point from my side, the same, that we have still the device and VDOMs, as indicated in these ranges from 1 to 10, 11 to 100 and higher. And there we have also the same thing, that we have there these stacking features where we can really easily grow. And yes, there is also a built-in ADOM license support. Again, you need FortiOS and also the FortiManager running 6.4.1 in this case to use the stackable possibilities that we are in fact relying on this version. Okay, so that's from my side from the sales pitch. Sorry, now we really want to dive into the real stuff, into the technical update. So feel free if you have any questions, and as indicated, you will get the slide deck and the video presentation then by email as a link for downloads. So I hand over to Dario and Marcus. Thank you.
Thanks, Victor. So yeah, Marcus and I used the last few days to play around with some of the new features of FortiOS 6.4 and also FortiSwitch and FortiAPs. As with any new features, they are very exciting from a technical perspective, but sometimes the documentation is a bit behind it. So we learned many things just from doing it, trying it out and so on, and there are some notes we want to share, so you can build up on that. So generally speaking, about upgrading, in that case, if we upgrade to FortiOS 6.4, they somehow just renamed the whole VLAN naming convention, which I will show later on, so be aware of that. And initially with 6.4 there was some issues with FortiLink, which I'll also cover on later. As with any update, always back up your working configuration, because downgrades simply aren't supported from Fortinet. So you can try it, but if there was some kind of migration script in the background or there were new features implemented, then the downgrade won't give you a clean configuration afterwards. So it's better to back up and restore if you made a mistake or something is not working than downgrading. Then something we are often asked during our daily business is, what is with the FortiLink compatibility? So speaking of that, can I use my old FortiSwitch with OS version 3.5 with my latest FortiOS 6.4? Can I manage the switch? The answer is in the link that it's shown on this slide. So I was kind of surprised how far the backwards compatibility and also forward compatibility was given. So you don't have to assure that the FortiSwitch the FortiSwitch is on the same release as the FortiGate. But yeah, to use all of the feature sets and so on, it's recommended, but not required. Then it's also good to know that there isn't an upgrade path for the FortiSwitches, so you can install the latest version directly on FortiSwitches running 3.5 or later. That's the reason behind it is simply that the whole configuration part of the FortiSwitches is stored on the FortiGate, almost all configuration. So if you just upgrade the switch, he will re-download the configuration from the FortiGate and starts working with the new release.
I just have one addition to that information, because it might also be helpful to know that the configuration is solely managed through the FortiGate, that you can all the time factory reset the FortiSwitch. So if you have configured something directly on the FortiSwitch before, it's always recommended to just reset the FortiSwitch and start clean by adding it to the managed FortiGate. So just make sure that you don't have any configuration which you don't know about and which might interfere.
Thanks, Marcus. Then the issue I was talking before was starting with FortiOS 6.4, you might have a configuration with the lower end FortiGates or desktop models where the FortiLink interface is running a hardware switch. And there was some nasty bug where it suddenly stopped working and you had to reboot it to correctly register the IP address of the VLAN interfaces and so on. And there wasn't really a solution that was reboot persistent that really worked. So yeah, I'm glad they fixed it just before this presentation with 6.4.1. So yeah, it's recommended that if you're going to look into the new features, just start with 6.4.1 if available and you're good to go. I was also talking about the different VLANs that are created with the different FortiOS versions. I know it's a screen, it's a little bit crowded here, but you will get the presentation afterwards and you can just take these screenshots as reference. Just to summarize it, in version 6.0, there were in the FortiLink context just 2 default VLANs created. So as soon as you plugged in the first managed FortiSwitch, there were the 2 VLANs. One was for data, that was the VSW named VLAN, and there was the quarantine VLAN. These were the only 2 that got created. Then in 6.2, they invited some additional VLANs, speaking for there was a voice VLAN, then there was a camera VLAN, and so on. They just wanted to give you an idea how to use the different VLANs, which is greatly for people who just are starting to use the FortiSwitches and are just starting to create additional VLANs and not put everything in the same layer 2 network. Yeah, but then there was the change with 6.4. There are still actually the same VLANs, but the naming has changed. And all of you that are working with the FortiGates know that you cannot simply rename existing interfaces using the GUI or CLI. So if you want to rename an interface, you have to back up the configuration, do some search, replace inside the configuration and restore it back. And that's also here an issue because speaking of the upgrade, if you go from 6.0 or 6.2 to 6.4, 6.4.1, they cannot rename the actual interface names. So if you have an upgraded configuration, you're stuck with the old naming convention, which from a functionality perspective does just giving you anything bad, but yeah, it's just if you see those things, you can, if you look at the VLANs, you see if it is a default installation or upgraded one. Then also side note regarding the IP addressing, if you go with the default setup out of the box 6.4, then there are some PPAS addresses configured. We assume that this is done to avoid any issues with your existing subnets. So just have in your mind that you might want to change the interface addresses from the default one because the PIPA ones, yeah, it makes it harder to troubleshoot because if you look at the computer, it will tell you it's a self-assigned address, or yeah, it just doesn't look natural for networking guys to use those in a productive network environment. Yeah, that's talking about the VLAN situation. Then there was also a feature introduced starting with FortiGate 6.2. So if you're coming from our currently recommended release 6.0, speaking of FortiGate, and decide to upgrade to the newer ones, the interface access policy of the Forti switches are overwritten with default settings. When I'm talking about the interface access settings, I'm speaking about the web UI, ping, SSH, or SNMP for monitoring. These were settings that you used to configure directly on the switch. And now they are managed by the FortiGate using the security policy local access. And the setting you can define there is, that's also a new feature. Now you can define separate settings for the out-of-band management port and for the internal, or better known as FortiLink connected interface on the Forti switches. So now you can separate those access. But yeah, if you had before used SNMP to monitor the switches, you have to re-add SNMP in that policy or it will stop working. So this is about the lovely overview of all changes to the managed Forti switches since 6.2. So and to prepare those presentation, we checked the release notes, copied all of the things, marked the interesting parts, and we decided to show you this one just to see how much effort Fortinet is pulling into the Forti switch development. So this is the first page. We arrive at 6.1 here, then go further 6.2 up to 6.4, and these aren't fixed issues. These are really new features that came to the managed Forti switch fabric. There's also a side note that if you have the Forti switch, you can run them as standalone, and the release notes there are even bigger. So I really think Fortinet is taking this switching thing serious and greatly enhancing the things, how you can manage them in the switching fabric.
Just one side note here. It's also something that we can see over the past releases that most of the features that might be available initially just on the standalone switch are getting integrated into the managed switch type. So you can also do things now in the GUI on the FortiGate which you couldn't do before, and we will also show you some things like with the MC lag later on. So just take care of that, or keep in mind that there might be features, if you use really a specific or a special feature that you want to have, like you had on another switch before, you might also look into the unmanaged switch documentation maybe the feature is there. You can even mix and match some features. You can configure something locally on the switch, but it's then not managed and not mirrored to the configuration of the FortiGate. So there are some mixed modes possible too.
Okay, yeah, that's sure. So just if you something we really had before, I think it was 6.0, I was starting to building our own security fabric, and I wanted to monitor those switches by SNMP. And SNMP configuration, you had to really go into each individual switch, configure the community settings and the allowed servers and so on. And I was thinking, oh, it's that sad that you cannot manage that centrally. And just one release later, 6.2, this feature was invented. So it was really surprising when I missed something. It really just got fixed in some new releases. And I haven't even done a feature request and so on. So yeah, I think there's a lot going on there. So now some notable things about FortiOS 6.4. The number of managed FortiSwitches by an individual FortiGate has greatly been increased. Speaking of the FortiGate 200 series, it was doubled, and for bigger ones was also increased by a large amount. So if you really have a large switching fabric, you can now even manage more switches with a single model.
This is also something to add here for the FortiAP. It's almost the same. We also have an increase of sometimes double the amount of APs supported since 6.4. We don't have a slide in there. We might slip it into the final presentation we sent to you. But yeah, just keep in mind that you also have increased number of managed APs as well, like FortiSwitches.
Okay, now to my personal highlight in the FortiSwitch 6.4 release or FortiGate 6.4 release. They just implemented kind of NAC functionality into the FortiGate, which really is great, which I will also show you later on in the demo for what you can use it. The FortiGate NAC mode is yeah, they tell you that you can use it for FortiSwitch and FortiAPs as well, but just keep in mind the whole logical thing is done on the FortiSwitch. You cannot configure NAC for the FortiAP. So what they're meaning when they are saying you that you can use NAC with FortiAPs is that you can bridge your SSID, send the traffic to the switch where the switch then can make the magical stuff happen and apply the policies you define. Then if you take a look at the right part, where I just put a screenshot of the actual configuration of the GUI, then they are always speaking to assign a VLAN or apply port-specific settings. I had some time to get it in my head, because the assign VLAN simply means the decision is MAC-based. So what this means, if a MAC address sends traffic to the FortiSwitch, he then just redirects this traffic into the VLAN you define here. And if you have multiple MAC addresses behind one port, you can also redirect the traffic in different VLANs based on the MAC address. And that's what with the assign VLAN actually is doing. The other thing is apply port-specific settings. So you really just configuring a port on the FortiSwitch with specific settings like allowed VLANs or QoS and so on. But these are completely different things, but I will cover that in the demo as well. What's just important to know is if you're running the NAC mode, there's always a fallback to an onboarding network when no other policy has matched. So you're really assured that a guest or bring your own device is, someone just plugs it in, it will just go to the onboarding network and not into your actual network. So yeah, it's always a fallback and you won't have access that isn't intended. For those who are also already work with some kind of NAC solution, there's sometimes an issue if you just change the VLAN of a port. The device might not get the information that the VLAN was changed and keeps its actual IP address, which was assigned by DHCP. So basically what's happening, the layer 3 configuration of the client stays untouched, but in the background, the layer 2 network did change, and yeah, the client won't get any connectivity. To address that, when you're speaking of port-specific settings, the port will just do a short shutdown and then reinitialize it. So the client gets link down, link up, requests new DHCP address, and recognizes that he's on the new subnet. But that's something that's not working when we're speaking about MAC-based mode that I mentioned before. So keep that in mind, that with the apply port-specific settings gives you better end user experience, because yeah, everything is working automatically. Something that I will cover later is that the whole NAC feature relies heavily on the device detection or device inventory on the FortiGate. And while the FortiGate does provide a local database with best known vendors, best known operating system, and so on, it doesn't cover all of the new devices that are yet just spread around the world in the IoT context. And that's why FortiGate just invented a new database, or FortiGuard service. That's the IoT detection service, which is part of Enterprise or FortiCare 360 bundle. You can also do this a la carte if you wish, just to purchase this specific feature. What it basically does is, if the FortiGate doesn't or cannot properly detect the device with its local database, he will send some device information to the FortiGuard services, which then returns the details about this Internet of Things device. They also implemented something that, or they are aware of, that this whole process can generate much load on the FortiGate. So they created the feature that they can offload this kind of lookups directly to the FortiSwitch, just to reduce the workload on the FortiGate. So if you have many IoT devices, this service might be a good option for you to just get a better inventory of your network. Then a feature that was already present in earlier versions of FortiSwitch OS, it was the quarantine network. The whole purpose of the quarantine network is, if you have a malicious device and either as an administrator say block or quarantine this device, or you might have some automated actions, then this device will be isolated from all devices in the same layer 2 network. Until now, they just moved the malicious device into a separate VLAN, and then the device just was allowed to communicate directly with the firewall. Here we were facing the same issue that, as I mentioned before, the device had to reinitialize his network settings to get the access to be redirected to the FortiGate, and that is now addressed by quarantine by redirect. What this basically means is that the FortiSwitches will implement some kind of ACLs, which prevents, let's them say, inter-device communication, and just do a MAC address-based approach and route the traffic directly to the firewall. So basically, it is quarantined on the same VLAN as it was working. Don't be confused, this is not the private VLAN functionality that you might know from other switching products. It's really just done on the MAC address and ACLs on the FortiSwitches. On the FortiGate side, if you quarantine a device, it will be added to an address group, which you can use in the policies, which I will also cover in the demo. If you're upgrading and coming from an earlier version of FortiGate, the default method of doing this is the current time by VLAN, and if you want to use the new default, starting with FortiOS 6.4, you have to manually change it. And to change it, you first have to disable the whole current time, and then use the command provided here to set the mode to by redirect. So now I head over to Marcus for the wireless part.
Thank you a lot, Dario. Yeah, we just have a few more slides left here. I try to make it quick because this is just something I picked out of the release notes as well, or the what's new features. So it's also possible since 6.4 to have ACLs directly on the FortiAP. It's not something that I would use really often, but it's just interesting to see that they also based some or created some low-level firewalling things on the FortiAPs. So you can decide a few rules like here, destination subnets, protocols, or destination ports, which you want to block by default. This is applied directly on the FortiAP before it enters either the tunnel mode or goes to the virtual LAN or to the bridged Ethernet connection. Just as you see here, you create access control list, then you apply it to the virtual AP, which is the SSID configuration on the FortiGate. And this is being pushed to the FortiAP, which is then applying the rules. This is also a small change from a feature which is already available since ages, client load balancing. And I see often by mistake or not intended that customers are just enabling those features on all of their APs in their company. I just want to make clear here that you should really only enable those features if you have a use for it or if there's a need for that. So if you think you have too many clients on the 2.4 gigahertz and you have a good coverage of 5 gigahertz, you can enable the frequency handoff feature. So clients are getting pushed to the 5 gigahertz. Or if you have a big meeting room or like a big conference room with 5 APs, which you want to load balance hundreds of Wi-Fi clients, you can use the AP handoff. And the main difference here is that this setting has been moved from a per radio perspective. So initially you needed to enable both those features on both of the radios. So you had to do it twice, and which didn't make much sense. So they moved it to the per AP level, and so it's available within the FortiAP profile. So you can just make a custom profile for 5 APs in your campus where you have lots of high density clients, and don't enable it for the rest of the profiles for the other APs. So this is more flexible and makes more sense to have it just once per radio, once per AP to be configured. This is something also I want to show you later on in the live demo, just show you a bit of the spectrum analysis feature. It's coming only for the FortiAP E Models, and it's quite handy to have it to show something, but it doesn't replace any, if you really have a big problem with interference, you might still need a notebook and have proper equipment which you can identify such issues. It might just give you an overview over many APs. You can go to your first floor and check for any interference from AP sites, and so you can start the tracing here and you see what's happening on the network or on the Wi-Fi spectrum. There's also possible to execute by CLI, but I wouldn't use it because it's much more visually pleasing on the GUI to have like a historical view here. But you can use the CLI execution commands as well if you need to. Okay, so let's just directly hand over to the live demo. This is again taking over Dario with his notebook. So we try to share his screen. Oh, just one thing, I want to show you first something, and I provide you a screen here from a second camera.
Yeah, we want to show you the lab that we built the last few days and also make some notes about that. Oh,
yeah. I'll try to share again. Sorry, my bad. So Dario is going to the devices?
Yes. So what we were just doing right now, we now used some lower end models to do this kind of setup because it is now possible, or it started to be possible with 6.2. So what we actually were doing, we used FortiGate 60E 2 times in a cluster setup. Then we just attached the core switches, which we connected by inter-chassis link. So we created a multi-chassis setup using FortiSwitches from the 200 series. Just to tell you here is, if you really want to do some multi-chassis setup, you have to use FortiSwitches of the 200 or bigger series. The 100 just doesn't support it. And then on those core switches, we have attached the access switches, which are from the 100 series. And yeah, what's like really new here is that you can do this whole redundancy thing with LACP and so on with the 60 series of FortiGates. And this was a feature that was introduced in 6.2 and makes such, let's say, enterprise level setup possible with desktop models of the Fortinet devices. Now, back to the FortiGate, how this setup looks on the GUI. So yeah, why are we showing you this kind of setup here is because in 6.4 they just really optimized the overview of the FortiSwitches. So if you go to the managed FortiSwitches, you are presented in this list view, which is okay, which gives you quite amount of infos. Then they also implemented a group-based approach where you can assign your switches to groups. You can also assign a switch to multiple different groups. And the purpose of these groups is just for maintenance. So you can just say, okay, reboot all my core switches, which you shouldn't do at any time, because if you have some redundancy, then boot one after another. But you could do that. You can also say, okay, upgrade all my access switches. So it just makes the maintenance easier for you administrators. But why I really love the new approach of the whole view is because of the topology that is now really presented in a great way. So here we see the FortiGate. We see the active one. We have an active passive cluster, which is connected by one time at the first switch, second cable to another switch. Here we have the MCLAG group. Before, you just didn't see this information in the GUI. And also here we have the interswitch link. If you stay on the link, then you will are presented some more information, like here we see it's an MCLAG inter-chassis link, which is running at 1 gigabit per second. This makes it really great for troubleshooting to see, is the link really at the speed you are expecting? Then also greatly is that you have some spanning tree information. To show you that, I really created a loop. So I made a loop with the switches.
I think it's this one here, right?
Yeah. It's one time connected to an access switch and another one to a core switch, which creates a loop. And here you see, it was detected by the spanning tree protocol and the link was disabled. If you go into the details, you also see which side or which switch disabled the port. It makes troubleshooting in a bigger instances of FortiSwitch fabrics really easy. One side note, to configure the MCLAG, you still have to configure the inter-chassis link using the CLI directly on the FortiSwitches. This is the only thing you have to go into directly on the FortiSwitches to do. But then it starts building that. Also, one thing is, before, when we were asked how to build an MCLAG setup, we told you, okay, go to the admin guide of the FortiSwitches, which gives you many options how to build that. And here, just in the FortiGate admin manual, they now have a simple step-by-step guide to build such a setup here. So I prefer the new documentation they created. Okay. Now, here just as of the release 6.4, it's just the way they are presenting the switch has evolved. There are, as I said before, you still have to do something in the CLI. There wasn't addressed that, but now let's really go to the big 6.4 feature, the NAC. Before we go to the NAC policies, I want to speak about device detection, which is the underlying feature of the whole NAC thing. Those who already tried 6.4 might know that the whole view or dashboard, or how you will name it, has completely been redesigned, and you have to search for the options maybe. You get used to it, I promise. I now best know this whole new thing. If you can't live with the new presentation of the navigation, you can also go here. That's a 6.4.1 feature, say reset dashboard and tell, oh, get me the old way back. So that's just a side note if you don't prefer the new menu system. So now what I wanted to show you is the device inventory, which is under user and devices. And these are all the devices that were categorized by the FortiGate using the internal database. Yeah, you might know that feature. Here are the devices, here are network basics, and then the tagging that the FortiGate done. You can also, if required, add some additional feature, but for the NAC, these are the filters you can use there, which I will show you afterwards. I've already mentioned that this whole detection is done based on a database located on the FortiGate. So if you go here under the FortiGuard to check the services, then you will see that here we have device and OS detection, which refers to this particular feature. If you scroll further down, there's also the IoT detection service, which obviously isn't not licensed on this box, but these are the things that are used for the NAC then. So yeah, let's show you guys what it's necessary to get the NAC up and running. The basic feature set is, to enable the feature, you go to your existing FortiLink device, and there are the new NAC. Basically, you enable this feature, tell it which is your, let's say, fallback VLAN. So now we are telling everything that isn't detected or can't be categorized will land in the onboarding VLAN. Then there's the feature I told you before, the bounce port. So as soon as a network change occurs, just bring the port shortly down and up again to reinitialize the DHCP process. And this is the thing you're doing here. You can also configure the ports, but I really prefer doing that on the FortiSwitch ports page.
We might just use this occasion to just show the port 1 on the PoE switch, which is currently not yet configured. It's port 1 here.
That's what Marcus is talking about, yeah.
So this port is currently just in the onboarding native VLAN because it's configured to NAC mode. And we have an AP here. I hope you see it in the video we attached. So I plug it in, and it takes some time because now the AP needs to boot up. Then it needs to be discovered by the NAC feature. But Dario will show later on the configuration or the policy we created for FortiAPs. So this should essentially provide all the required native VLANs and the allowed VLANs required for FortiAP to come up and register with the FortiGate. So this is quite handy to just use any random port on a switch. It will be automatically provisioned and put into the right VLANs.
Yeah, just for the default layout of this whole FortiSwitch ports page is limited. So you might have to enable additional features like QoS policy, LLDP profile, and also the access mode. Yeah, just click it the way you need it for your daily work. And what's supposed to happen as soon as the AP gets the power and is booting up is that the allowed VLANs are configured automatically, and also LLDP profile and QoS policy might change. What I wanted to show you in the meantime is, if you, most likely you're dealing with voice over IP devices, and the classic approach was you choose the port that you want to use for this voice over IP device. You have to configure the VLANs to say, okay, as an additional VLAN, I need the voice one. Then, yeah, I had to configure the LLDP profile where the switch tells the phone which VLAN it has to use, and most likely then there will also be a requirement to define some QoS. And I think the limitation here is that you have to prepare the switch, you have to prepare the ports before the actual device can be connected. And also what then happens, some network administrator to decide that, okay, I will always use the 4 last ports of a switch to pre-configure them for phones or for APs or whatever. And then you face the issue, okay, suddenly I have to, the new employee should have connectivity and you run out of ports for the client. So that's something you can easily address by NAC mode, because the NAC mode configures the ports dynamically based on the device you attach. So that was, initially we skipped that one. So if you want to go from normal mode to NAC mode, right click access mode NAC, and then this port is enabled for the NAC feature.
You can do that on all ports. Just use shift, click, and you can put the whole switch into NAC mode if you want to.
Also, if you want to just change the native VLAN of those 3 ports, yeah. It's really easy. So we really like working with the Forti switches. We use them as our data center switches, and they're really great for administration because it makes everything so easy and intuitive to use. Now let's go to the NAC policy we have here. So the magic happens here. We have a policy which says, okay, the device family are FortiAPs. This information is from the device inventory. Let's just edit this one. At the moment, you have to just copy paste those information from the device inventory, or if you prefer, let's see if it works. No, let's do it the other way. Let's just connect.
You could use it from the GUI, right? From the user and device list.
Yeah, but I've just user device list. I just want to show you the command on the CLI. So this also gives you the information that you're used to see on the GUI. And here we have hardware vendor, we have type, we have family, and these are the things you can use for the NAC policy. I really hope, or let's say I assume that in the near future, Fortinet will add some kind of drop-down, so it will make it much easier to configure your NAC policies. As of 6.4.1, it's a copy-paste thing. And here also a note on that one. The device inventory happens after you have connected the device. So let's imagine that you connect the phone. The only thing the switch really knows at that moment is the MAC address of that phone. So if you want to create a NAC policy that changes the VLAN directly up and connect, you have to use a MAC-based filter here. If you don't do that, what will happen? The device will go to the onboarding network as we defined before. And as soon as the FortiGate has detected this device, the VLAN will be reassigned based upon the configuration here. And also here we see that the feature is still in an early phase, because you just can't configure some of those features in the GUI. So it's always, at the moment, those you have to define in the CLI. But yeah, once you know the commands, it's really easy. So let's just show you the VLAN policy we had defined here. They are really that simple. So for the FortiAPs, we defined the native VLAN to be demo FAP, so the access points are in our own infrastructure network, and then we have the allowed VLANs that Marcus will use later on in the SSIDs that are additional ones that are enabled on that one, and that's how you define those VLAN policies. Then let's just quickly check if the AP was detected as promised.
Yeah, I already saw it in the FortiNAC policy.
Perfect.
The show afterwards.
Here it is. So before we had the onboarding network without any additional VLANs. Now we assigned the native VLAN and the allowed ones. I think no LLDP and QS we haven't configured, but that was something we had for the voice one. So we also connected a FortiPhone, which was, oops, I think I have to reboot it. Let's do that. Meantime, but yeah, that's how it works. So Marcus connected the AP. It was on the onboarding network. As soon as the FortiGate get the all other information, policy was applied, and the access point can now be used. Another interesting use case which we are trying to show you, to be obvious, yesterday it didn't work the way we had it before in our lab, so let's hope that today is a better day. The idea is we connect an unknown MacBook to the FortiSwitch. We will land in the onboarding page. We'll try to access the internet, which, based on the configuration we have done, requires us to enter a username and password, which then should match this policy up here. So what we're doing right now is, because we are authenticated as a specific user, we will land in a specific VLAN that we have defined here. So yeah, you can do some assignment based on authentication. So let's switch to the demo laptop I have here and try to show you this exciting feature. Okay, hope you can see my screen. Currently, we are in the onboarding network. Remember, this is what I was talking before. Out of the box, the FortiGate uses APIPA addresses, and that's why my MacBook is telling me, oh, this is a self-assigned address. So don't be confused of that one. What I'm also trying to show you is I'm currently pinging the default gateway, which actually is the FortiGate, just to show you when the network or VLAN switch is happening. Now let's, okay, same as yesterday, unfortunately. Sorry guys, because I can't show you that, because now I have to reboot my MacBook to get it working. It's really sad, because it's really a great use case.
Let's try again later. Maybe
I can offer
the FortiAP first. I tried to share my screen again. I'll take over here. You should see the screen, right? Okay. Yeah, so as you've seen before, the FortiAP is connected to the port. It has automatically been assigned to the correct VLAN. This one, the special AP here, was already running. This one is newly provisioned on the new connected port. And so it has connected, built up the CapWeb tunnel, and is now here. Something that also has been integrated much more into the GUI is using or making use of the LLDP profile. So LLDP helps to understand which device is talking to what switch, or FortiGate is having this and that switch attached to their FortiLink. And so it's building up the whole topology view from the FortiLink perspective. And this also helps to make use of those informations to show off where an AP is actually connected. So if you have a FortiAP which is connected to the, I just go here to the logic or to the physical view, because this shows also the topology we have built up with the Forti switches. Sometimes takes a while to build up the GUI. Yeah, okay, that didn't work. So today we got a little hiccup here. Right. This should actually be about the same like when we go here to the managed switch interface, where we have the topology of the different switches connected. You should also see the FortiAPs connected to what switch, but it doesn't show you exactly what ports we were using. And it's often the case that if you're in a building, you have the entrance area where you have an AP, you don't know where it's actually connected because it's on the ceiling, you don't see the port number, so you need to find out by, I don't know, following the cables to the rack where it is actually connected to maybe reboot or to assign different VLAN or to unplug it. And so this is much more useful if you have 40 switches and 40 APs all the way, so you can go into the 40 APs and you see directly which port it is connected on which switch. So this is on the 108 power or PoE switch on port 1. And here we tried something a little more advanced. We used 2 ports from the 40 APs built in the link aggregation interface. And so it shows also this one here that we have 2 ports connected. And there are even more details. If you click view more details here, you can see what are the radios doing. You can also go to the general health options here. This is also a new feature which is only available due to the new LLDP readout. You can see what actual bandwidth or what's the port speed of the ports connected. This has been an issue before because we couldn't see what link speed has been negotiated by the FortiAP. This is now just directly shown to you in the GUI, and here it even shows both ports for the LAG link aggregator port. So you see everything is working as it should. There's also, again, this was already there with 6.2, but you can put it in a GUI. You can also add the same features or get to the same features here. If you press on the AP on a floor plan, you see the same details again. And just let me try the other AP here, the one we have in the meeting room. Just need to connect to a client first. So give me a second. Or actually, the client is connected here. So this is one MacBook we have on here. It's connected on channel 100. And now I can use the other AP, this one here, to also use the spectrum analysis. And here I can decide if I want to use the 5 gigahertz on the port 100, I can use the channel. So this is only defining what's been used down here. Just give it a second for building it up. So if you change here, you either have the megahertz channels or you have really channel numbers you're used to. And as you can see, here's the port 100. I intendedly used 80 megahertz for this SSID on this radio. So I try to create a speed test right now. I just hope that the FortiAP is responding here. I just wanted to show you a bit of traffic, but right now it's not doing what I want to do. I just give you a few informations on what's to read out here. So this is a general signal interference. You see just on the black colors, there's not much happening, but if you have persistent red colors, there's something going on the network. So there's a reload happening and the signal is occupied. And this is the same like above, but just showing a time flow. So you can see building this up, and if there's any traffic going on, you can monitor that over time, and it should show off what's going on in the network. For this test, I show you in the 2.4 gigahertz what's going on. Maybe there's a little much or a little more going on. So as you can see, there's much more traffic on channel 1 and maybe a bit on channel 6. It's different from time to time, but so you can see from the colors here, if there's some transfers going on the network, it should build up, and you can identify any sources of interference here. Also, the duty cycle is just showing how much of the airtime is actually used. So if you have a lot of slow clients, they might still eat up all the airtime you got, and they're transferring data at the point you cannot. It's like a walkie-talkie. If someone is occupying the channel, no other can speak with each other, so it's just one at a time that can use the channel, and this shows you how occupied the airtime is actually. Again, like temporary, and here with a spectrogram, how it is used over time. So you can 60 seconds, you can monitor over a minute. There's also a bit of a readout from what could be detected here that might cause interference. As you might know, 2.4 gigahertz is a band where everything is using, every device is using this area. And so you have cordless phones, you have Bluetooth headsets, you have Zigbee devices transmitting data. So there might be other interference sources than just the neighbor AP, but this might give you an idea here. So we have a Bluetooth device, which is also showing up to use a lot of airtime. I just need to show you one more thing regarding the VLAN probing. It's also an interesting feature if you want to know if the FortiAP is really provisioned for the right VLANs. You can just put a range in here and start polling all the virtual LANs if it can access it, because this helps a lot if you have an AP plugged in, you're not sure if it's configured correctly, or if you not have yet a NAC device or net detection in place. You need to be sure that the demo client and the guest VLAN is assigned to that specific port, and you can see that here. So they're assigned. You can see the interface and the subnets, and even on which Ethernet interface it is connected to the AP. So this is quite handy. I don't know. Should we hand over again to Dario?
Yeah, but I will show another feature that I promised before, just to close the whole thing. Just a quarantine feature.
Okay, I stop sharing my screen.
And some closure words at the end, yeah. Okay, just because I was mentioning this feature before, there are multiple ways to quarantine a device. So basically there are different parts of the GUI where the FortiGate does show you the device information, and you can click on those devices, and there's this button here to quarantine any devices. I can do this from here, from the NAC policies. I can switch over to the device inventory and say, here Windows computer. No, actually we want to use MacBooks. So no, we quarantine this host. And this is it. Now all the magic happens, which will reconfigure their ACLs to the specific MAC address of that device. Ensure that the traffic is really redirected to the firewall, and at the firewall end I have created a policy containing the address object quarantine devices, and if I hover over this entry, you see it, the device which is quarantined was added to this group. So with that one, we ensure that this device just can't connect to the internet anymore. So it's really easy to work with the quarantined devices. Maybe you would just say, okay, if I quarantine a device, it should still be able to receive updates from my antivirus software or something like that. So it's really easy to accomplish that. These were the things I wanted to show you. I don't know, Marcus, do you have something left?
No, actually, I missed something that I wanted to tell you. If you go to the managed FortiAP profiles, if you want to use that spectrogram, just go to the 21E, the upper one. To use actually that spectrogram, you need to put the radios into dedicated monitors. So it's really important to know that you cannot just use the spectrum analysis at any given time. You cannot just use on your entrance AP where you have your company guests visiting. If you put it into dedicated monitor, it will not be able to host any clients. So this is something you need to know. And there's that specific AP we have here, the 231E. And if you just go to the other profile, you can see there's a third radio just available for that purpose. So this might help if you have a radio like this to use it as a dedicated monitoring radio. It cannot really be used as a AP or client hosting radio. But there's one thing at the top of this profile where you can still decide how you want to use this AP. You could decide that you don't want to host any 2.4 gigahertz clients, that you want to use it solely as a dual 5G radio. So you can use this AP specifically to provide a lot of bandwidth to clients using 5 gigahertz, which is not that occupied than 2.4 gigahertz. And you just need to be careful here. You have, as you can see, channel 100 to 140 on the upper radio. This is the upper band. And the lower radio, radio 2, is only available to send on 63 to 64, 36 to 64. And this is mainly because those channels need to be have space in between each other. You can use two radios narrow in one enclosure, sending on the same or nearby channels. So you need to have the upper band and the lower band both in place to host dual 5G clients. This is more like a basic feature to know, but it's quite a handy radio here if you want to have high density setups. Yeah.
And I want to just make a final note about the whole NAC feature. And we know that this feature, as you've seen it wasn't working as expected. And also we have to admit that during our testing, it was, let's say, a little bit shaky, this whole feature, because it's new. You're trying to something, then it will take some time to reassign the VLANs. I wouldn't recommend it using in production yet. So, but it's a good environment to test, and I think it's really the direction which the switch Fortinet is going with the switches, and it will be a great feature as soon as all these glitches has been removed, and also maybe the GUI integration has been optimized. But it's still fun to play around, and I think it will really be useful for you administrator out there to dynamically configure your switches.
And the cool thing that you are aware, we as BOLL using FortiSwitches in the production. So this is working stable, but of course not on the latest and greatest switch release as we have demonstrated now in the lab. So we have looked on the question and answer, Fragen and Antworten section. There have been no questions so far. We keep it a little bit for a moment open. Just a few last informations. If you have the next slide, please, Marcus. If you would like to test this in your own environment, we will start, as indicated in the last BOLL Online session, shortly the employee promo. So during the summertime, from the 1st of July till end of August, we have the possibility for employees, Fortinet resellers, who have to be certified NSE 1 and 2 or NSE 4 and higher, the possibility to buy a FortiGate for a really, really cool price, as well as some FortiAP and FortiSwitch models are included. And for these guys who already have the FortiGates in place, we have some service renewals in this promo as well. So stay tuned. The newsletter will be handed out end of this month. So either this or latest beginning of next week. The next thing which I just want to indicate is we have also very important Expert Summit Digital Edition to highlight, which is unfortunately the date we have indicated, the last BOLL online session, already fully occupied. So the 29th of June till 3rd of July is fully booked. But the cool thing is Fortinet opened a second edition, which will take place 5th to 9th of October. So if you are interested to really deep dive into several aspects of the Fortinet solutions, we invite you to join this really exciting expert summits. Of course, we are looking forward that this will happen in the next years, maybe live at place. But for the current situation, this is a digital edition. And last but not least, you will get, as I mentioned in the links we already provided, also in this presentation, some references to the last two BOLL online sessions, FortiOS 6.4 What's New, Part 1 and 2. And last but not least, we are hoping to see you live again, not just by video conferencing, video session in our BOLL morning session, which will take place on the 8th of September in Lausanne and the 9th of September here in Wettingen regarding FortiMail version 6.4 and of course the highlighted new solution Office 365 integration as well. So stay tuned, please take the opportunity, and we would look forward to meet you there. So from my side, big thanks to my two colleagues, to Marcus and Dario, who has really invested a lot of time for preparing the labs. And as we have seen, we have even a third technician with us, Murphy Slow, who sometimes makes the life not as easy. But we have seen this is really something we can be quite confident that as soon as it's a little bit more stable, it's really a cool thing. So thank you very much that you joined our BOLL online session, and we keep the Q&A part still open. If you have something you would like to post there, we will try to gather it and send out also the answers with our email follow-up. So, merci encore une fois and bon appétit, à prochain. Hein?
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, yeah. Bye.